among you. כי כל אחד היה מתגאה והיה מתפאר ומתברך בליבו, because everyone would be מתגאה, feeling pretty neat and pretty wonderful, yo-ho-ho, and he would be glorifying himself, and she would be praising herself in her heart, saying, אני השלמתי את הבניין. I myself built the congregation. I myself completed the tabernacle. Believe תרומתי, without my gift, אי אפשר היה להקים את המשכן. The place wouldn't have been completed. There wouldn't have been enough. My gift was essential for making the congregation complete and whole. But then we remember the passage from Mishlei, V'to'avat Hashem kol gava lev. God thinks anyone who feels really neat is obnoxious. It's a loose translation. An abomination is anyone who walks around in the synagogue with his or her chest puffed out saying, look at me, I'm the one whose gift completed this place. I am very, very important. All it would take would be a few Jews, even in the greatest congregation in the world, walking around feeling that his or her gift had completed the building of the Mishkan of the congregation. Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu mishareh shchinato al ga'avat hanim. That the Holy One's presence will not dwell on people who are feeling smug, arrogant, self-satisfied, proud, like they built the place. And then a wonderful passage from Masechta Arachim. God says, almost like in an old-time cowboy movie, Ein ani v'hu yecholim ladur b'madur echad. Ain't room enough in this here world for your ego and me. You pick. If I had to go further and get theological, I would say that the central problem of all religious and communal life is how to deal with ego. Because remember, God is the self of the universe, and therefore the question is, what do you do with yourself in such a way that it does not banish the divine self from being present? And the minute you feel smug and self-satisfied and proud and chas v'sholom and arrogant, God is gone. Aval, but, kasher hayam. But when we have that last word in the verse, v'hoter, and more, yoter mikfi hatzorech, more than what was needed for the building of the tabernacle. V'nish'aru terumot shelo ishtamshan bahem. That meant that there were some gifts that were given to the congregation that they didn't need. Oh, it's a beautiful gift you've given us, Mr. Kazanowitz. Thank you. We'll just leave it up behind the back of the building. We don't need it. Oh, thank you very much, Mrs. Fagenholz, for your lovely gift of, we don't need it now, we'll just stick it in a closet. What does that do to the ego of one who makes such a gift? The text explains, everybody's heart was broken inside him or her. Everybody was an ego mess. Oh my God, they didn't even need my gift that we worked so hard to give to the temple. They could have built it without it. I have a broken heart. And Ulai terumati, perhaps my gift, nish'ara mibachutz. Maybe my gift is just still leaning outside in the alley behind the temple. Ein li chilek b'mishkan Hashem. I have no portion in building the tabernacle of God. Kafar ze garam mimele elahashreit shchina. This is the thing that by itself causes the dwelling of God. Citing Isaiah, Et daka eshon, with the people who don't feel so arrogant, with the people who feel a little modest, with the people who occasionally have a broken heart, with them I dwell, says God. Yotzei ki, and therefore what comes out of this ha-vehoter, this and more than enough, turns out Ishlim bitzel v'chizek et hadayam, that last word in the sentence, that there was more than enough, actually completes and reinforces and strengthens and modifies the word dayam, enough. Al yedei v'hoter, by means of saying, and there was more than enough, hayab b'diyuk Moshe ha'ayat sarif. That was exactly what was needed in order for the divine presence to dwell in the congregation. May you all bring enough for the work of this congregation and more. And may you never know whose gift they didn't need. And may Reb Moshe always be the one who reminds you, maybe we didn't need your gift, but I'm glad you're here anyway. I think that may be one of the important jobs of a great rabbi like yours. May God strengthen the work of his hands.
Friends, I'm very happy to be here together with you, the TBZ congregation, with your Moshe, your rabbi, with my very good colleagues who are here, and to listen to the beautiful singing that we've just heard. Cantor Steingard said that he hopes that in about 5 years he'll be able to speak English to you. I myself felt when he was speaking that it's wonderful to hear a Jewish word, a Yiddish word. My hope is that in 5 years, he'll have all of you speaking Yiddish. It's a great pleasure to participate in this simcha with Reb Moshe and his family and friends and congregants, all of us who've gathered here to honor him, to officially welcome him, although he's been on the scene for quite a long time and he's made a very important mark both at Bet Zion and in the entire Jewish community. And we have a personal association, Reb Moshe and I and my family. Reb Moshe has spoken at our Temple Emmanuel a number of times. He's davened for us very often on a Shabbat. His wife, Anne, and their wonderful children are very good friends of our children. And so we really feel that we are part of this mishpacha. And I know that Reb Moshe is going to bring, and has already brought, a wonderful spirit of enthusiasm and of the love of Judaism to this congregation. When Moshe Rabbeinu, the original Moshe Rabbeinu, before Reb Moshe, when he was looking for somebody to take his place, God said to him, I want you to find a person, and he described him, Ish Asher Ruach Bo, a person in whom there is spirit. And Reb Moshe is a person who has really real spirit, of his love for our tradition, for our people, for Yiddish, for Hebrew, even English, and for all of the languages that we converse and study in. And I know that Moshe is going to do a wonderful job in helping Bet Zion to become a major force for Judaism in our community. And it's a great pleasure to share in this simcha, my wife, myself, my son, all of whom are here today, to share in this simcha with the whole Waldoks family, and also to welcome Ann's mother, who is here from Florida as well. The yellow sheets, if you would take a look at the yellow sheets, what I've chosen is some selections that have to do with the most important teaching in all of Judaism. As you see at the top of the page, it says, is it possible to love your neighbor? The way this came out in the print is it possible to love your neighbor, Rabbi Samuel Chiel? And that I'm not so sure about. But the truth of the matter is that the ultimate concern for a shul, for a synagogue, is really to try to achieve this great verse from our Torah, Yikra, Leviticus chapter 19. And that's what I want to explore with you a little bit today. This particular verse is found in one of the greatest chapters of the Torah. It's in Vayikra, chapter 19, sometimes referred to as the Holiness Code, part of the Holiness Code, attempting to teach us, each one of us, what it is, what we need to do in order to achieve Kedushah, holiness. What does holiness mean? It means separating ourselves from that which is unholy, trying to bring ourselves into the presence of God, to feel the awareness of God with us in whatever we do, every day of our lives. And so there are a number of very specific teachings in this chapter which attempt to help us do that, leading up to ultimately the climax. You shall love your neighbor as yourself, and here you see in the first selection, you see what it is that this chapter begins with. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the whole Israelite community, say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Now, in order to achieve, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. First of all, this section tells us, number 2, that lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha, you shall not hate your fellow human being in your heart, but you shall reprove your kinsman, but incur no guilt because of him. Ocheach tocheach et amitecha. That if you find that you feel animus towards somebody, you hate somebody, you're angry with somebody, that the way the Torah says what we ought to do in order to try to rid ourselves of these corrosive feelings, what we ought to do is to go over to this person and say to the person gently, it's very important, that be gently, carefully, and privately done. That's what the Talmud says. And say to this person something like, I'm sure you don't realize it, but you said something at a meeting that we were at together the other day which hurt me deeply. If you come too aggressively, the person probably will become very defensive, deny that he did anything or she did anything. If you come to the person in a way which is going to help this relationship, then it's quite possible that you can remove some of the animus, and the person may apologize, or the person may not even be aware of the fact that he or she offended you. And so first what we have to do is to try to rid ourselves of some of the feelings that all of us walk around with. So that's number 1. I'm just going to take a few of these selections because there's so many wonderful ones, but I'm going to choose a few. Let's take a look at number 4. Number 4, coming from a book of the Talmud called Avot Rabbi Natan, which is a midrash on this wonderful book in the Mishnah called Pirkei Avot, the teachings of the fathers, or the ethics of the fathers. It says, Ezehu Gibor Shebi Giborim, who is the mightiest, who is the strongest person of all? It's the person who is able to transform his enemy into a friend. And that, again, fits in very well with the verse which says, reprove your fellow man or your fellow human being for something that he or she has done, or at least you think that they have done, that has offended you. And if you're able to reestablish a relationship with this person, then you are really a person who is gibor shebegiborim. You are the strongest and the mightiest of all, because you're able to overcome some of those feelings that we have within us. Now it's Rabbi Akiva, who is the next passage, number 5, who says, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha zeh kval gadol b'Torah." Rabbi Akiva, this great teacher of ours, great rabbi of the Talmud of the 2nd century, says that the most important principle of all, the most important teaching of the whole Torah is you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The problem is, how do you really get yourself to love your neighbor as yourself? This is not easy. What Rabbi Akiva is really saying is that we ought to begin to be concerned about our neighbor, his or her children, other human beings, just as much as we are about ourselves. That seems to be an almost impossible kind of mandate. Because after all, my first loyalty is to the people who are closest to me, my family. To be able to do that for anybody is really very difficult. And that's why, in a sense, there is a kind of a different attempt to explain how you do this, which comes from the Talmud. That's the next one. This is Hillel. This is one of the most famous passages of the Talmud, and it's that passage in which a non-Jewish person comes first to Shammai. Shammai, you know, being a rather irascible sort of personality. And he says to him, "Teach me the whole Torah while I'm standing on one foot." And so Shammai says, "Get out of here, I don't want to talk to you," because clearly this man is really making fun of Judaism. That's what Shammai senses. Any person who comes to me and says, teach me your whole religion, your whole tradition, while I'm standing on one foot, is somebody who is really trying to say to me, this whole tradition of yours is so limited, it is so small, that I'm sure that you can teach me the whole thing while I'm standing on one foot. So Shammai responds in his characteristic way, which is, I'm not going to deal with you, don't kid me, this is a tradition, which I've spent my whole life on. When he comes to Hillel being a person who was known as the gentlest of souls, a person who always was willing to accept other people lovingly, when he comes to Hillel says to him, what is hateful to you, do not to your fellow man. This is the entire Torah, all of it. The rest is commentary. Go and study it. So what Hillel is doing, it's a different phrasing, and it also has a different meaning from the Ahavta l'reacha kamocha. What he's saying is, what you hate to have somebody do to you, don't you ever do that to anybody else. And that's the whole Torah. The Talmud says that this man, this non-Jew, was so impressed by what Hillel said to him that he went and he studied and ultimately converted to Judaism. I think what's there is even more, not just the words that Hillel used, but the approach. Instead of driving this person away, he brought him closer to himself and to us. And he said, there is an answer. Even though you may be kidding me, you may be making fun of my tradition, I will accept this as the basis for a serious question. And if you learn not to do to anybody else what you hate somebody doing to you, then that is the essence. The rest is commentary. And if you study, you will learn how to effectuate this teaching in your life. Now, this is a much easier version, it seems to me. Hillel's version of how you achieve a kind of a wonderful acceptance of other human beings is not to do anything to another that you hate, not to do this to anybody else. It's easier, I think, than the teaching of the Torah, which is the ultimate desideratum, the ultimate goal of love your neighbor as yourself. One of the teachings of Isaac Luria, who was the great teacher of Kabbalah, of mysticism in the 16th century in Safed and Tzfat in Israel, he said one of the ways to test this on yourself, the next teaching, before appearing before God in prayer, every individual in the community must first accept the positive commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, when you come to shul, whether it's at Bet Zion or Emmanuel or whatever shuls we are part of, when you come to shul this coming Shabbat, you can even try it now if you want to, as a wonderful exercise. Look around, and if you see somebody that you dislike, hopefully somebody that you dislike intensely, I mean, if you really want to test this, it shouldn't be just a mild dislike, but it should be a real substantial dislike. Look around. If you see somebody that you can't stand, say to yourself, before you start praying, before you try to approach God, say to yourself, I don't want to point anywhere. I point up there. That Ludwig, somebody I can't stand. But you know, in order to approach God in the spirit of holiness, I'm going to have to say to myself, I like this person. I'm going to force myself to say, I like this person. So it can be tested in one of the most important places of all, within one's own synagogue, where we are really attempting to try to come closer to God. Well, I just want to conclude with a couple of teachings. Number 8. Nachmanides, or the Ramban, who lived in Spain in the 13th century, he reinterprets, because everybody has difficulty with these words, you shall love your neighbors yourself, because it's so hard to fulfill. Nachmanides says you must desire for your neighbor what you desire for yourself. That's much more manageable. In other words, you would like to have enough food, a home,